Amazing surprise exposed. The third time I walked in, my son's panic revealed hidden fears. Mike trudged home after another long shift at the garage, his hands a mess of grease and oil, yet his spirit determined to bring joy to Evan's face. Today, he thought, today would be different. He envisioned the two of them enjoying their favorite pizza, Marvel cartoons blaring in the background, laughter bouncing off the walls of their small Midwestern home. But as he quietly opened the door, the usual warmth was nowhere to be found. Silence filled the air. He scanned the living room, and dread twisted in his gut when he spotted a familiar blanket peeking out from the corner. Evan's blanket. "Evan?" Mike called out, his voice tinged with unease. No response. His stomach dropped as he moved toward the room. He could hear the soft, stifled gasps before he even reached the door to his son's bedroom. There, beneath the bed, frightened eyes met his. Evan. It was like the world spun around him. How had it come to this? Mike's heart raced. Was he failing as a father? Memories of his dad's gruff lessons flashed through his mind. "Life's hard, Mike. Toughen up." He'd always wanted to embody that resilience, but how was it that he had unknowingly turned Evan's world into one of anxiety and distress? The boy's eyes, wide with fear, reflected a brokenness that Mike felt a duty to mend. Yet, he didn't understand how. Each day, Evan seemed to shrink further beneath a mountain of worry, palpable like the weight of an unholy burden. The panic attacks had started creeping in, the whispers of kids at school tormenting him like a relentless storm. Mike's instinct was to protect him fiercely, but in doing so, he found himself wielding expectations like a sword, forged from his own childhood. Evan needed love, not pressure. Had it ever crossed Mike's mind to approach parenting with gentleness instead of toughness? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. His desperation drove him to the school, where he faced the administration head-on. Words tumbled from his mouth in a chaotic barrage as he reported the bullying that Evan faced. With each sentence, Mike's resolve increased, but twisted pain burrowed deeper in his gut, questioning everything he had done. He envisioned a life built on higher standards, but Evan needed more than just a ticket to success. He needed to feel safe. Feeling resolved, Mike left the school, but uncertainty clung to him like grease on his hands. Returning home again felt surreal, approaching Evan's small frame, curled up on that bed. "Buddy, talk to me," he urged softly. But as Evan's small shoulders trembled, Mike knew it wasn't enough. Could he shed the heavy mantle of expectation he wore? What fears did Evan harbor unspoken? The shadows in their quaint living room deepened, and uncertainty coursed through Mike's veins. He was losing grip on his son's childhood, and that realization sat heavy on his heart. Mike took a deep breath, steadying the storm of emotions swirling within him. There was a tightening in his chest, a feeling he hadn't encountered before, the urgency to change. He could no longer float beneath the weight of expectation. He needed to dive deeper, to explore the uncharted waters of his fatherhood. It was time to confront his own vulnerabilities. He sat at the edge of Evan's bed, careful not to invade the boy's sanctuary. "I'm here," he whispered, his voice barely a tremor above the silence. Evan's eyes, still glimmering with tears, reflected confusion and fear, but beneath that lay a flicker of hope. Was it possible that his presence alone might bridge the chasm of misunderstanding between them? A shift stirred in Mike. An inclination to speak from experience yet without the veneer of his past. Memories of his father's rigid guidance filled him with unease. He didn't want to replicate that. Instead, Mike realized he needed to embody openness, to model courage and vulnerability. He hesitated, contemplating top-down parenting where he lacked perspective. What if he simply met Evan where he was, without pretense or judgment? Evan, he began slowly. I know you might feel scared about school, about what the kids say. I went through hard times too. I didn't always handle it right, and sometimes that made things worse. The words tumbled out, unpolished but sincere. But I want you to know it's okay to be scared. It's okay to feel lost. He took a chance, hoping for an opening, a small crack in the wall. Evan looked at him, the tension in his small frame easing just a fraction. You felt that way? He managed to stammer. Yes, Mike replied, grateful for the flicker of connection. I struggled, and I still do sometimes. But talking about it helps. Let's face things together, okay? Could it really be this simple? Trusting in the unscripted? Diving into conversations around their fears? Mike dared to hope. In the days that followed, Mike committed to a new approach. He pledged to listen, to create a safe space for honesty between them. Each evening they set aside time for courage talks, a term Mike invented to replace serious discussions with something more inviting. They'd take turns sharing their worries. Evan starting with school, the mean boys, the looming presentations. Mike would share moments from his life with raw honesty, the lessons learned intermingled with storytelling that sparked a smile or a shared laugh. One night, while curled up with a bowl of popcorn, Evan opened up further. Sometimes, I don't want to go back, he said quietly, the shine of vulnerability clinging to his words. Back to school? Mike asked gently, feeling the familiar ache in his chest. Yeah, because what if they laugh again? Evan's small voice trembled. The words erupted from him with immense weight, and Mike realized that those were whispers of an adolescent heart crying for connection, for safety. Mike's resolve to protect his son transformed into an unwavering commitment to empower him. We can find a way to face that together. You're stronger than you think, buddy. He watched Evan's face move from worry to contemplation, the gears of self-worth beginning to turn. A flicker of resilience sparked in the boy's eyes, reflecting the warmth of illumination. Maybe, just maybe, Mike wasn't only rebuilding his son's confidence, he was rediscovering his own. That Friday evening, Mike found himself at the garage, sleeves rolled up, working on the pickup truck. He felt the echo of their earlier conversations in the rhythm of the wrenches. What did it mean to cultivate strength in vulnerability? The realization began to form. A pursuit not just for Evan, but an evolution for himself. Driven by this newfound purpose, he pondered creating a workshop on emotional resilience for parents in his community, curating strategies to share with others. The starved part of Mike's heart ignited, pushing him to explore his experience more deeply. Suddenly the thought pressed on him with urgency. What if he could transform his experience into something greater for Evan and other children? The desire to see change flared within him, as midnight enveloped the garage in darkness, casting long shadows over him. Mike couldn't shake the feeling. There was a journey ahead, and it invited both father and son to embark on a path towards clarity. A path of understanding, resilience, and empowerment. But just as hope intertwined with resolve, doubts crept in. Who would he turn to for support? Would he find the courage to step beyond his fears, both as a father and a man? The next day awaited with unspoken challenges. The moment of confrontation with his own hesitations was approaching, and Mike knew the journey was just beginning. As the sun broke through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the kitchen, Mike felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Today marked the beginning of something different. A potential shift not only in how he communicated with Evan, but also in how he approached his role as a father. He had scribbled down ideas, concepts for the workshop he envisioned, and yet uncertainty gnawed at him. Would anyone even come? Lifting his coffee mug, he admired the steam rising. Each wisp felt like a fragile thread, as ephemeral as the ideas swirling in his mind. He needed to be meticulous. The stakes were higher than he initially thought. It wasn't just about himself anymore. It was about Evan's growth under his guidance, and ultimately, their shared experience. Sipping gingerly, he recalled his promise to Evan during their courage talks. The objectivity gleaned from listening to each other helped him channel his fears into actionable steps. Today, he resolved to pitch his workshop idea to a few close friends at work, those he knew could provide constructive feedback. At the construction site, amidst the clatter of tools and machinery, Mike felt the pulse of energy around him. Conversations buzzed, laughter echoed, but a seeming ease belied the narrative of hidden struggles. He wondered how many others felt like him, unsure of the best way to navigate the complexities of parental love and support. After organizing a small afternoon break, Mike gathered his coworkers around the break table. He wrung his hands, feeling the weight of their gazes. "I want to share something I've been working on," he announced, taking a moment to catch his breath. "It's a workshop about emotional resilience for parents and children." Instantly, a flurry of curiosity filled the room. Some perked up at the mention of emotional resilience, while others raised eyebrows, questioning the validity of such a discussion in their work culture. As he laid out his vision, he noticed his heart raced. The idea is to create a space where parents can share their fears, their stories, to help kids like my son, to feel more secure and understood. He hesitated, grappling with judgment. Would they scoff at him? Dismiss him? But to his surprise, instead of negativity, he was met with nods of interest. "I think we could all use that," one coworker admitted, his voice thoughtful. "They don't teach us how to talk to our kids about tough stuff." The realization that others shared his struggles electrified him. They exchanged ideas, and Mike took copious notes, inspired by the insights that emerged from their candid conversations. It became clear. This wasn't just his story. It belonged to many fathers and mothers navigating the rocky terrain of parenting. But even amidst newfound encouragement, doubts lingered ghost-like in the corners of his mind. Would he truly be able to lead such a workshop? What if he failed to connect with parents who were more experienced than he? By the end of the day, Mike felt invigorated but achingly uncertain. The workshop idea had transformed. It was no longer just a way to help Evan. It became a healing journey for him too. Yet, the gnawing question persisted. How would he reconcile his self-doubt with his desire to lead and support others? As Mike drove home, grappling with these thoughts, he recognized that he hadn't just opened up space for other fathers. He had to confront the hidden fears within himself. Once home, he staggered into the living room, where Evan sat hunched over his homework, brows furrowed in concentration. In that moment, Mike realized that he wasn't just trying to empower Evan through his own vulnerabilities. He was also battling to illuminate the path towards his own self-acceptance. "Hey, bud," he said softly, deciding to offer a piece of his day to Evan, a gesture they initiated in their courage talks. "I want to hear about your day, and I have something to share about mine." But just as the air thickened with possibilities for connection, the doorbell rang, cutting through the moment. A familiar unease settled over him. Who could it be? For once he felt it was not merely about the surprise knocking on their door. It was also about the prospect of what footsteps followed. Would they lead to new challenges, new revelations, or perhaps new answers to his fears? The door creaked open, revealing the figure of Sarah, a neighbor Mike had known for years, but had never engaged with beyond the occasional pleasantries at the mailbox. She stood there, a slight frown etched on her brow. Her eyes, usually bright with a welcoming light, were shadowed with concern. "Hey, Mike. Sorry to drop by unannounced, but I was hoping you could help me with something," she said, her voice shaky. There was an underlying urgency to her tone, a sense that whatever she needed would take precedence over the casual chit-chat they typically indulged in. Before Mike could respond, Evan's chair scraped against the floor as he stood up abruptly. His paper trembled in his hand. Can I go to my room?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, but laced with a palpable strain. Mike's heart sank. He recognized the signs of distress on his son's face. "Of course, buddy. Take your time," Mike replied, concern sharpening his voice. He wanted to follow Evan, to find out what haunted him now, but Sarah's presence pulled at him. "I really need your advice about my daughter," Sarah continued, shifting nervously from foot to foot. "She's been acting strange lately. I think something's going on at school." Mike's resolve weakened. He couldn't let himself be consumed by someone else's troubles when his son's distress was right in front of him. "Can it wait? My son seems off." The pause between them felt heavy, charged with unsaid words and shared responsibilities. Sarah hesitated, her lips pursed, then nodded. "I understand. Maybe I should just—" No, Mike interrupted, his urgency for clarity breaching the veneer of his politeness. "Tell me what's going on." As the neighbor spoke, Mike's mind wandered to Evan, who had dashed upstairs, his footsteps heavy with anxiety. What burden was Evan carrying this time? Did it stem from his hints of self-doubt? The fear of inadequacy? The realization that, for all the progress he believed he made in children's emotional discussions, he still felt so powerless as a father? When Sarah shared her concerns about her daughter's mood swings and vague mentions of bullying among friends, Mike found himself externally present but internally engaged in a growing race. Not just to understand her troubles, but to figure out what learning from her experience could mean for him. At that moment, fragments of the workshop materialized in his head. Perhaps he hadn't just been conceptualizing a program centered around emotional resilience. It was a call to action for himself as much as for parents like Sarah and children like Evan. The walls of discomfort that separated their lives were fading, leaving raw, emotional vulnerability exposed. "Have you talked to her about it?" Mike asked, threading his fingers together, his analytical thoughts illuminating connections. Sometimes kids hold on to things because they feel they can't talk to adults. As Sarah nodded, a flicker of light entered her eyes. The conversation began untangling threads of confusion and concern, weaving them into a more cohesive understanding of her daughter's behavior. He felt a growing sense of responsibility, not only to support Evan, but to provide guidance to others as well. Yet, the reality of Evan's turmoil loomed large, a looming specter against the backdrop of their dialogue. Time ticked by relentlessly, each passing moment amplifying Mike's worry. He abruptly concluded the conversation with Sarah, although he hadn't completely resolved her concerns, feeling he needed to prioritize his son's emotional state. "Sorry, I really need to check on my son," he said, stepping briskly towards the stairs. But even as he climbed, a realization shot through him. This was more than a workshop. It was a call to rediscover who he was. As he reached Evan's room, knocking softly before entering, Mike was determined to confront not just Evan's unspooled feelings, but his own too. All the contradictions of being both a son and a father. Inside, he found Evan still staring at his homework, the pages untouched. "Hey, let's have that talk we started before. It's important," Mike intoned, taking a seat beside him. "I'm okay, Dad," Evan mumbled, yet avoidance clung to every syllable. "No, you're not, and that's perfectly fine. But we need to talk." As Mike began to peel back layers, both his own and Evan's, He knew he was finally facing the truths he had skirted around for too long. It was a moment of revelation he had never anticipated. The murky depths of his own doubts and insecurities mirrored in his son's silent struggle. The journey toward emotional resilience was to be shared. A workshop was merely the framework for their ongoing, intricate dialogue. But as they began to communicate, a new wave of doubt crashed over Mike. Was he truly prepared for this? Would he even know how to navigate the depths of their conversation? The answers lay just out of reach. But their earnest exploration together might just chart a course to something deeper, more profound than either of them anticipated, revealing threads of understanding that would connect them in ways neither could predict. What would they discover about themselves along the way? Mike settled into the moment, keenly aware of the emotional chasm between them. Evan's reluctance hung in the air like a thick fog. Mike's breath hitched. The pressure to act, to bridge this gap, was mounting. "Let's just talk, okay?" he urged gently, determined to shatter the silence. Evan hesitated, his eyes darting to the wall and back to the untouched homework, betraying deeper currents of fear. "About what?" he asked, his voice barely rising above a whisper. In that moment, Mike realized that the real conversation had to begin with vulnerability, an acknowledgement of their shared struggle. "What if I'm not that good at this, Dad?" The confession spilled out, raw and unfiltered. Evan's gaze dropped, revealing a boy weighed down by expectations and assumptions. "What do you mean?" Mike asked, heart racing. So much unspoken, hidden beneath the surface. Evan's fingers fidgeted with the edges of his notebook. "Like, if I don't know how to deal with stuff, with kids at school. When I try to talk, it feels like no one's listening." A knot tightened in Mike's stomach. It was too close, too familiar. He had spent years learning to guide children through their emotions, only to find his own son trapped in the same fear he had faced as a child. "You're not alone in that. I've felt the same way in my life," Mike admitted, his voice thick with empathy. Evan's brow furrowed, confusion swirling in his mind. "You? But you know how to help others. Sometimes it's easier to tell other people how to deal with their feelings than it is to handle my own," Mike confessed, pulling back layers of responsibility and fear. "What if we figure this out together?" He leaned closer, finding strength in their shared vulnerability. Evan hesitated, and Mike could see the internal struggle reflected in his son's quivering frame. Finally he nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Okay, I guess." With that small opening, Mike began to share his own experiences, moments of dread and doubt, feelings he had long buried beneath the surface of professional optimism. Each story he told opened a bit more of the world and its complexities, clearing a space for Evan to step into vulnerability too. As the conversation deepened, they explored feelings of inadequacy and the fears of rejection, connecting in a raw honesty that defied the years of prior distance. Evan articulated his hopes and fears, while Mike found clarity within his own coaching principles, the essential importance of empathy, understanding, and open dialogue. Yet, even as they delved further into emotions, Mike couldn't shake the feeling of undercurrent anxiety. The deeper they unearthed their own fears, the clearer it became. There were still shadows lurking in their pasts, unanswered questions that begged for resolution. Was Mike prepared to uncover those buried tensions that intertwined with Evan's? "I've realized something," Mike began, probing deeper. "In trying to guide other people, I've glossed over my own pain. It's time for both of us to confront what's been suppressing us." Evan's eyes widened, the implications sinking in. They were standing at a precipice of emotional revelations. Would they have the courage to leap together, confronting fears that echoed through generations? But just as hope surged, an unsettling thought gnawed at Mike. What if this exploration of their struggles opened up wounds neither of them were prepared to face? What if the truth they uncovered were darker than anticipated? The clock on the wall ticked ominously, reminding him of the short time before their next challenges would begin. Each question unanswered, only fanning the flames of trepidation. As they sat in the stillness, ready to confront themselves, Mike realized he stood on the threshold of a more profound journey. "Are you ready for this?" Mike asked, catching Evan's eyes with his steady gaze, hoping to anchor them both as they prepared for a deeper dive. He could feel the anticipation hanging thick in the air. Evan's breath hitched again. "I think so. But what if it's too much?" Mike felt the weight of that question, its implications resonating deeper than just tonight's revelations. This was not merely about them. It reflected the larger battles of life itself, where pushing through vulnerability often led to transformation, while avoiding it invited stagnation. But the moment of truth had come, the choice to wade into the unknown, or retreat to the safety of silence. Something within Mike steadied him. He grasped the arm of the chair, feeling the rough wood against his palms. Real, unwavering. "We won't know unless we try. Let's face it together." Together they were about to step into uncharted territories. What awaited them just beyond the horizon of their fears was unknown, but it promised to shift the very dynamics of their lives. Would they find healing, or would the truths they uncovered fracture their already fragile connection? As silence enveloped them, the chasm widened, and with it the uncertainty of how deeply this journey would go. Evan sat cross-legged on the floor, his posture a mingling of nervous energy and determination. Mike, still perched uncomfortably on the edge of his chair, braced himself for what was to come. This moment felt monumental, yet the familiar tightening in his chest hinted at the weight of vulnerability they were about to explore. "Let's talk about what scares you the most," Mike ventured, his voice steady despite the uncertainty. Each word felt like an invitation to a conversation that could unravel long-standing threads of pain or bind them closer together. Evan's eyes flickered with uncertainty, the unspoken fears dancing in the corners of his mind. What if I'm just not enough?" Evan's voice trembled, exposing layers of insecurity. "Not enough to, belong. There's always a moment in class when I think they'll all see that. I don't want to be that kid." The admission struck Mike like a slap, deep familiarity sinking into the marrow of his bones. Understanding what Evan felt, what he had once felt, threatened to pull a potent mixture of compassion and sorrow from the depths of his own past. Mike could feel the weight of expectation clouding them both, pressing down harder than any external force. "You don't have to be perfect to belong," he assured, shifting softly on his chair. "Actually, it's the mistakes and imperfections that remind us we're human." A spark of rebellion flickered in Evan's eyes. "But it feels like everyone expects me to be good at everything. If I mess up, it's like, what then?" Mike leaned in, breaking the emotional barrier. "Evan, it's the stories we tell ourselves in our heads that often shape our reality, not the reality itself. I'd like you to try something with me. Can we share our mistakes? Can we show each other that it's okay to be imperfect?" Evan studied Mike's face, searching for a flicker of judgment or irony. Instead, he saw sincerity reflected back at him. "Like what?" he asked cautiously, curiosity lacing his voice. "Let's start with me." Mike breathed deeply, feeling the weight of his own fears inch closer to the surface. "I overlooked my own need for help at work when I first began coaching. I thought I had to have all the answers. It led me to feel overwhelmed and disconnected from my team. In truth, it wasn't until I admitted I needed help that I began improving, for both myself and them." Evan's eyes widened, and Mike noticed a shift, curiosity tentatively replacing skepticism. "Seriously? But you always seem in control." "That's the facade. Mike replied, opening the window wider for vulnerability. Control doesn't always lead to confidence. Sometimes it's a mask, and that masking can be suffocating. A pause hung between them, thick with possibility. What about you, buddy? When did you feel the most out of control? Evan's brow knitted, a torrent of emotions tangled within. Finally, he exhaled. Probably when I try to make a new friend. I don't know what to say or do, and it feels like I'm being awkward. I avoid even trying sometimes because I think it will just be easier. Mike shifted, the connections they were making threading through his professional understanding. So it's not necessarily about being likable, it's the fear of rejection. Exactly. Evan's face brightened, relief pouring from his expression. It's like this wall I bang my head against. That's it, Evan, Mike confirmed, feeling the enormity of this breakthrough. Walls can be broken down, and it starts with speaking what weighs us down. Recognizing our fears allows us to turn them into something constructive. Encouraged by the exchange, Mike added, "What if we worked on overcoming these barriers together? Perhaps we could outline strategies for tackling those situations that make you feel like you're going to explode." Evan nodded eagerly, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. "I'd like that. But what if we run out of things to discuss?" The question hovered, reflecting not only Evan's fears but also a deeper, unspoken uncertainty Mike carried about their evolving dynamic. Would they truly confront everything lurking in their shadows? Then we'll make it a quest of sorts. When one conversation flows into another, the possibilities are endless, Mike proposed, ready to embrace the challenge of that journey. We'll build this toolkit to face everything, together. As Evan's expression morphed from doubt to anticipation, an electrifying pulse of readiness surged within Mike. Beneath the surface, an ever-looming question throbbed. Would every session bring them closer, or would intimacy unearth more significant truths they'd yet to confront? Though Mike felt the tension beneath their breakthrough, he held it in check. Both were on the brink of discovering deeper fears, hidden amidst joy and connection. It was a risk, this newfound journey. Continuing felt imperative, but also daunting. "We'll dive deeper into our toolkit at our next meeting," he said, swallowing hard. The idea of mapping their journey felt incredibly intimate, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. Yet, as Mike prepared to wrap up this moment, another haunting thought flickered through his mind. What would happen when they were forced to confront not just theirs, but the wounds that echoed through the generations of their family? Would that connection strengthen them or ultimately lead to their undoing? The conversation was only beginning, but the stakes had never been clearer. Evan arrived at their next meeting, his pulse quickening with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He had spent the days since their last conversation reflecting on his fears, almost obsessively charting out the moments that terrified him most. Each day felt like a battle against his mind's relentless tide of self-doubt. As he entered the familiar space, he carried with him a notebook filled with observations, questions, and a flicker of courage. Mike greeted him with a warm smile, the kind that seemed to pull back the shadows clouding Evan's mind. "Hey there, ready to dive in?" he asked, inviting Evan to take a seat on the floor again. The simple act of sitting side by side made the session feel less formal, more like an exploration with a trusted companion. "Yeah, I think so," Evan replied, gripping his notebook tightly. "I've been thinking a lot about that wall I bang my head against." "I'm glad to hear that," Mike encouraged, keeping his tone soft, yet focused. "Why don't we start with the moments you identified that trigger those feelings?" Evan nodded, flipping through his notes to find the first entry. "One of the biggest things is when I get called on in class. I always feel so unprepared, like everyone's looking at me, waiting for me to screw up." Mike's heart echoed with Evan's admission, recalling a sea of similar memories. "What do you think happens when that moment strikes?" he asked, aiming to peel back the layers of Evan's response. I just freeze up, like my brain turns to mush," Evan confessed. "And then I feel embarrassed, and it's like a loop where I just keep thinking everyone sees me as the awkward one." There was an insightful depth to Evan's realization. He was identifying the issue. "What makes you believe that? Is it something they express, or is that narrative coming from within?" Evan hesitated, a shadow falling across his features as doubt crept in. "I'm not sure. I guess it's just this feeling I have. Like there's an expectation I should be, I don't know, perfect? That desire for perfection can be a heavy burden to carry," Mike reflected. "Let's explore that feeling. What do you think would happen if you let go of that need?" Evan frowned, furrowing his brow as he processed the question. "What if I mess up?" "Messing up doesn't erase your worth. In fact, it's often through mistakes that we learn best. What if you reframe that moment, seeing it not as a catastrophe but as a chance to discover something new about yourself?" Evan looked contemplatively at the wall for a moment, the wheels in his mind visibly turning. "I guess it doesn't always have to be so serious," he said slowly. "But it's so ingrained in me to perform well. Even at home, I feel that pressure, like I need to be the best version of me." "Let's unpack that," Mike said, his voice maintaining a steady cadence. "What does the best version mean for you? Is it tied to expectations others have of you? Or is it something you've created for yourself?" Something shifted in Evan's expression, as if the question pulled the threads of his inner conflict tighter. "Both, I think. It's hard, you know. I want to please my parents, my teachers, even my friends. I feel like I can't just be me sometimes." "Do you ever feel like the best version conflicts with who you genuinely are?" Mike pivoted, wanting to dig deeper into Evan's internal struggle. "Sure," Evan admitted, uncertainty mingling with clarity. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just pretending to be someone I think everyone expects. Like I'm afraid if they see me for who I really am, they wouldn't like it." "Evan, consider this. Vulnerability is the birthplace of true connection," Mike articulated, his gaze steady. "When you show up authentically, despite the fear, you open the door for others to share their truths. You have the power to change the narrative, to redefine what belonging means to you." There was a spark in Evan's eyes then, a hint of burgeoning determination. "Maybe I can start small. Like, when I feel that pressure, I could remind myself it's okay to be imperfect." "Exactly," Mike encouraged, his heart swelling with pride. "You're on the right path." As the session progressed, they began to outline actionable strategies for Evan to confront his feelings in real time. They crafted a list of phrases he could use in moments of anxiety, simple affirmations he could recite quietly to ground himself. It felt like they were building a toolkit, one hammer and nail at a time. By the end of the session, as Evan tucked his notebook under his arm, a sense of possibility filled the room. What if next week we go further? Maybe explore how our families influence these pressures, he proposed, excitement cutting through the anxiety. "That's an excellent idea, Evan," Mike replied, a grin spreading across his face. "That might just lead to some powerful revelations." But beneath his smile, the weight of untold stories swirled in Mike's mind. Their next conversation would ask deeper questions about their own pasts. He could feel the tension building, could sense that they were about to venture into territory that could challenge not just their courage, but their very identities. "Let's gear up," Mike thought, bracing himself for what lay ahead. Evan was stepping forward, but so was he, and it was going to get complicated. Evan walked into the next session with an unexpected wave of anticipation. The weight of his notebook felt lighter this time, each step echoing a newfound sense of purpose. As he settled next to Mike, he could feel his heart racing. Not with fear, but with the thrill of exploration. "Hey, Evan? Ready to pick up where we left off?" Mike's tone was encouraging, infusing warmth into the air heavy with potential. "Absolutely. I really think delving into family dynamics could reveal a lot," Evan replied, the hint of determination in his voice betraying the trepidation that lingered. "Great. What's been on your mind regarding that?" Mike leaned in, interest piqued. "I've been thinking about my parents a lot, how they always pushed excellence. Every report card, every project. It felt like I was under a microscope. I couldn't just be okay. I had to be exceptional," Evan stated, the frustration clear in his voice. "Do you think that pressure shaped how you view your abilities now?" Mike prompted, wanting to peel back more layers. "Definitely," Evan confirmed, furrowing his brow as he grappled with the memories. "I remember my dad saying, 'Good enough isn't enough.' And now I hear that voice in my head all the time. It makes me feel like I'm not worthy unless I achieve something remarkable." "What if we challenge that statement today?" Mike suggested, his voice smooth and inviting. "Let's explore the idea that good enough doesn't imply failure, but instead acknowledges the journey you're on." Evan hesitated, feeling the walls of anxiety start to tighten. "But isn't striving for more a good thing? It feels like if I don't aim high, I'm just settling." "What's wrong with settling?" Mike asked, tilting his head thoughtfully. "Sometimes showing up as you are, with your skills and flaws, is powerful in its own right. It's part of being honest about where you are in life." The room fell silent as Evan contemplated this. His mind drifted to moments of vulnerability that he had not yet allowed himself to embrace. "I guess I never thought of it like that. If I'm honest, I sometimes feel like I just want to please everyone." "Let's unpack that feeling," Mike encouraged. "What do you gain from that desire to please others?" Evan chewed on his lip, grappling with the question. "I think I'm terrified of being unwanted. Like, if I'm not what people expect, then they'll just walk away." "Have you experienced this before? When someone walked away after seeing you for who you are?" Mike's questions cut close, challenging Evan to confront his fears head-on. "I don't think it's ever truly happened, but the thought is terrifying," Evan admitted, his voice quivering. "So the fear of rejection drives you. But is it based on something real?" Mike pushed back, his words soft, yet inciting deeper thought. The flickering light in Evan's mind began to spark. "I suppose it isn't. My friends have always been supportive, but I've been so focused on achieving that I didn't notice their acceptance. Maybe it's time to reflect on those relationships," Mike offered, nodding in support. "Could you try reaching out to them authentically? Share what you're feeling? Stepping away from perfection could invite a different kind of connection." Evan's breath caught momentarily, realization dawning upon him like the sun breaking through clouds. "I've never really allowed them to see my struggles. I always felt I had to show my best face. Remember that vulnerability reveals strength," Mike reminded him, leaving space for the thought. "There's courage in allowing people to witness your true self. It might be the catalyst for deeper relationships." Evan felt his heart race, excitement threaded with anxiety. "I think I want to try it. Test the waters with them and share some of my fears. Maybe I'll discover something about myself in the process." "Exactly," Mike affirmed, pride swelling in his chest. "And we can strategize on how to approach those conversations. Finding your voice will empower you." Shifting in his seat, Evan felt a knot of fear and thrill intertwine within him. As he leafed through his notebook and added a new section on authentic relationships, he recognized that this was more than about him. It was about transforming his understanding of connection. Looking up at Mike, he felt a twinge of excitement. Could it be possible that sharing my struggles might inspire someone else who feels the same? Mike's smile widened, pride in Evan's journey palpable. Absolutely. Authenticity resonates with others. It's like throwing a pebble into a pond. The ripples can reach far beyond what you perceive. As the session drew to a close, Evan's thoughts swirled with strategies and potential conversations. The prospect of vulnerability felt empowering, yet terrifying. What if he stepped into those waters only to find rejection lurking? The doubts surfaced, but this time, they mingled with a flicker of hope. As Evan stood to leave, his mind buzzed with possibilities. None greater than the looming conversation with his friends that would put all his resolve to the test. "Let's set up a plan for next week," Mike encouraged, his eyes shining with anticipation. "How will you prepare for the conversations that lie ahead?" As the door swung shut behind him, a sense of urgency filled Evan. The moment of truth loomed ahead, brighter yet more intimidating than he had ever envisioned. But within that tension lay an undeniable promise. Perhaps the fear would lead him to discover a new facet of himself altogether. How deep could he dive into his authenticity before hitting the surface? Evan entered the next session with an electric pulse of apprehension coursing through him. The final meeting with Mike was approaching, and the weight of the past week was heavy in his chest. He had avoided contacting his friends, grappling with whether he could truly show his vulnerable side. Still, the anticipation of potential connection danced tantalizingly in his mind. "Hey, Evan," Mike greeted, his voice warm and inviting as always. "I'm glad to see you again. How have you been since we last spoke?" Evan hesitated, the anxious thoughts swirling in his head. I haven't reached out to anyone yet. I wanted to, but fears crept in?" Mike interrupted gently, his brow furrowing slightly, indicating that he understood the struggle without judgment. "Exactly. It's like I've built this wall. I keep thinking about what I might lose if I share too much." Evan shifted in his seat, acutely aware of how his palms were clammy against the cool leather. "Let's explore that fear," Mike encouraged, leaning back but maintaining an engaged posture. "What do you think you would lose by being honest?" Evan took a deep breath. "I guess it's the fear of being seen as weak or less capable. If I open up, what if they see me differently?" The words tumbled out, laced with a sense of both vulnerability and frustration. "Let's flip that," Mike suggested, his voice a soft anchor in the storm of Evan's thoughts. "What if opening up strengthens those relationships instead? What if your struggles resonate with them, allowing for a deeper bond?" The prospect intrigued Evan, yet an internal battle unfurled. "I've always thought that admiration is based on strength and achievement. If I'm not showing that side, why would they still find me worthy?" Consider this. Real strength can be found in authenticity. People are drawn to others who exhibit genuine emotion, who allow themselves to be human. Mike's eyes held Evan's, grounding him in the present moment. Evan caught himself contemplating that notion, trying to picture himself embracing vulnerability. "I don't know if I've really seen my vulnerabilities as strengths before." "Let's break this down," Mike urged. "What are some things you're afraid to show your friends? What feelings or experiences do you keep hidden?" "Failure," Evan replied, almost instinctively. "I've feared failing in their eyes, not achieving what's expected of me. What if you viewed failure as a chance to learn and grow rather than a reflection of your worth? We all fail. It's part of being human," Mike offered, letting Evan marinate in the idea. His thoughts spiraled into memories of failed projects, flops in school, and moments of insufficiency. Yet amidst the darkening reflections, he began to see glimmers of potential. Each failure had nudged him closer to understanding himself. I think I'm starting to see a pattern. But now it feels like a leap. Can I really take that leap? The words felt powerful as Evan uttered them, an acknowledgement of his yearning for authenticity pressing forward. Leaps require a plan, Mike stated, leaning in closer. How about we strategize? You could start by reaching out to just one person, someone you trust. Map out your conversation beforehand. What do you aim to share and accomplish? A plan. His heart raced with the excitement of newfound empowerment. I can do that, he said, his voice more resolute than it had been moments ago. I want to share about my fears, my experiences. Maybe even express how their support has meant to me. Perfect. You might be surprised at how they respond. Mike smiled, his confidence in Evan apparent. As they worked through the details, Evan's thoughts shifted. Could he truly unveil himself to his friends? It felt daunting yet thrilling. He pictured the faces of those who cared and the connections forged through honesty. Evan left the session inspired, but doubt still nagged at the edges of his courage. What if his revelation turned into an empty echo, leaving him further isolated? Determination battled against fear. He had the tools. Now he needed to take action. The moment of reaching out loomed like a summit he had yet to climb. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. How would he initiate this transformative moment? With every step away from the session, Evan calculated the weight of his fears against the prospect of solidarity. Now, the question was not if he would leap, but when the leap would occur. As he approached his car, he realized the choice lay firmly within his hands. Would the call to his friends shatter the illusions he'd clung to? Or might it craft a gateway to the acceptance he yearned for? He had reached a crossroads, and the adrenaline of possibility surged within him. The time to confront his past decisions was fast approaching, and he realized the greatest discovery awaited him just past the edge of fear. Evan stepped tentatively into the familiar room, the air thick with anticipation. The workshop he had long envisioned now finally materialized in the form of a gathering that felt as monumental as the weight of his insecurities had once been. Today's meeting was not just about him. It represented a transformative step toward becoming a bridge for himself and others in their emotional journeys. Are you ready? Mike asked, placing a steadying hand on Evan's shoulder. The warmth of that contact surged into Evan, grounding his rapidly beating heart. I think so, Evan replied, his eyes scanning the room filled with parents eagerly awaiting to engage in authentic conversations. The weight of expectation shifted. What once felt like a burden now transformed into a pulse of empowerment. As the meeting unfolded, Mike introduced the concept of emotional resilience. He emphasized authenticity, making it clear that this workshop was a space for sharing rather than judgment. Evan felt an electric surge of purpose. The knowledge that others harbored similar struggles echoed his own experiences. It was a powerful reminder that vulnerability weaved connections deeper than achievement. When it was his turn to speak, Evan's breath hitched slightly, but he straightened his spine, summoning the courage he had cultivated. I wanted to share something close to my heart, he began, locking eyes with a few supportive faces. For a while now, I've felt this pressure to be perfect, always striving to meet expectations, mostly my own. It's exhausting, and it's held me back from experiencing the genuine connections I want. In that moment, the shift was palpable. Heads nodded in understanding as he further bared his soul, recalling his journey with Mike and the courage talks they'd shared. With each word, Evan felt the layers of hesitance unclothed from his spirit. He wasn't merely storytelling. He was dismantling the walls of isolation that had once circled around him. Responses bubbled up from the audience, each revelation echoing his journey. Other parents shared experiences of their own, the universal pressures they faced, and in that tide of collective honesty, Evan found an unanticipated wellspring of strength. Mike caught his eye and smiled, pride shining in his gaze. You see? This is what building connection looks like. A shared experience rooted in vulnerability. Once the session wrapped up, the room filled with laughter and support as parents exchanged contact information and made arrangements for follow-up discussions. Evan felt like a candle in a once-empty room, illuminating paths for others who, like him, had struggled in silence. As he stepped outside, feeling the crisp air on his face, the realization hit him. He had not only transformed his narrative, but had laid the groundwork for others to do the same. He had shared his fears and emerged intact. He had conquered the anxiety of being seen. He felt recognized, competent, and fulfilled in a role that now anchored his identity. "I can't believe I did that," he whispered to Mike, who walked beside him, the pride in his smile palpable as they approached Evan's car. "I always knew you had it in you," Mike replied, a warmth settling between them that spoke volumes of their journey together. In direct contrast to the paralyzing fear he once felt, Evan now carried the torch of inspiration. He understood that vulnerability was not a weakness, but rather a strength that could catalyze connection and understanding. As he slid into the car, a sense of solid confidence enveloped him. He had stepped into discomfort and achieved not just recognition, but mastery over his emotions. Evan felt empowered to continue this journey of connection, not just for himself, but for every young person who would benefit from the opening he had initiated today. The light shifted around him, reflecting not just the change within, but the growth he had effectively harnessed. He left that workshop knowing that this was only the beginning. He had conquered his fears, and proven to himself that vulnerability could create pathways to personal and communal understanding. Evan looked forward, eager for the next conversation, both with his friends and within himself. The realization settled gently. This was the defining moment that marked a new chapter in his life, one dedicated to authenticity and emotional resilience. Now is the time to embrace that journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support is crucial. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Your thoughts matter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. It's the moment to inspire and uplift. Don't wait, even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting this channel through these actions.